All right, what's going on, everybody? How we doing? I'm very excited. Very excited here today. This is going to be our first ranking video of the channel. This is going to be our preseason rankings, so this should be able to apply to your best ball leagues as well as your redraft because we're going to go ahead and rank them based off of total fantasy points projected to be scored by the end of the year. Now, there is going to be some. You're going to have players that are more volatile than others, meaning some players are going to have a higher ceiling with a lower floor, and then some are going to have just a steady baseline throughout the season as far as the points that they're scoring per game. So we will touch on that a little bit, not a whole lot. So you can use this ranking video with your discretion on how it applies to best ball versus redraft. But this is just going to be an overall ranking video. Now, what I want to say right off the bat is there's going to be some hot takes in here. I'm making this how I feel genuinely. I'm not going to water it down to avoid criticism. I'm going to go ahead and give it to you how I feel these players will finish, and that means that there's going to be some hot takes. That means there's going to be some rankings that you don't agree with, and that's actually something I'm really excited about for these videos. Is I want to see your guys' opinions. I want to hear them. So go ahead and throw them in the comments and tell me where I am totally off and tell me where you would rank these players. You won't hurt my feelings. So I'm really excited to just go ahead and give my genuine opinions on these players. Now, what I will say also is that we're going to try to get through all 32 quarterbacks in this ranking video. So we might fly through some of the later tiers because, you know, when you get into your, when you get into your Ryan Tannehill's, Jameis Winston's, Jared Goff's, Matt Ryan's. It's more about what tier they're going in because the idea is you're not grabbing them in your best or in your redraft leagues. At that point, once we pass tier B or early tier C, that's when the redraft league players can kind of tune out, and then that's when the best ball draft players can still lock it in and pay attention. But I think once you get into that range, you're drafting those players as maybe your second or third quarterback in the draft, and you're going to pair them up with other players because they're not going to, when you get to those lower tiers, they're not going to be produced on a weekly basis. So I don't think we're still going to rank them in order how we feel about them, but we're not going to talk about each player individually for very long. We're going to go ahead and give you the tier as a whole. And that'll give you an idea of where you want to start targeting those players in the draft. So we can go ahead and get right into it. Let me go ahead and switch this over. And we'll get right into it with the quarterback that we all know is going at the number one position for me. Last time we saw him at a full season, he ended with 1,000 rushing yards in 2020. And then the year before that, he was off of a historic quarterback year with 421 fantasy points in 15 games, 1,200 rushing yards, 3,000 passing yards, and finished with an average of just around 30 points per game, broke fantasy leagues, and was individually won people's leagues for them. So we're going to go ahead, cut to the chase, and throw our boy Lamar Jackson up there. Now, as the NFL progresses and as it develops into this newer age of quarterback play, we're targeting the rushing side. We're targeting the rushing upside with 1,200 rushing yards. He's basically playing two positions. We saw it last year in a different position with Deebo Samuel. When you have a player that is involved in the offense and the entire offense runs through that player, that is a person you want on your team, especially if it's the quarterback position. The reason the Ravens aren't worried about grabbing more wide receivers in this offseason, even though they probably should, as a Ravens fan, I would love for them to go out there and grab a higher-end wide receiver one. But the reason they're comfortable not doing that is because everything runs through this man. The running game, the throwing game. He opens up his passing options with his legs. So when the entire offense is run through one player and one player only, we're going to go ahead and throw him back in the number one spot overall as a quarterback. And I truly believe that Lamar will not get to 421 fantasy points again on the season. But if he can get a watered down version to 400 points on the season, we're looking at 25 points per game, and we'll take that all day long. Another thing to remember here is, let me just confirm, Lamar Jackson's ADP on Underdog Fantasy. We're going to be comparing our ADPs to Underdog Fantasy because it has the most and the best data as far as rankings go. It is based on a best ball draft style, but there's millions of players and millions of dollars invested in. There's no free leagues on Underdog Fantasy, so the ADP rankings are the most accurate we can get. So we're gonna talk about those rankings as we go through this ranking video. And Lamar Jackson is currently going with an ADP of 50 overall. And 50 overall puts you into the early fifth round, and a lot of times you'll see him fall to late fifth round. So when you can get a potential quarterback one of the season, a potential league winner in the fifth round, that's a value we're going to be capitalizing on all day long, and that is why we have a high exposure to Lamar Jackson at quarterback. Moving on from Lamar Jackson, and we're going to stay in the S tier for this player. We're going to go ahead and throw Josh Allen in there. Now, Josh Allen, if we're talking about previous seasons, Josh Allen had quite a season last year as well. We talked about Lamar Jackson having 421 points in 2019. Josh Allen had 417 with 24 points per game. So he is another player that the majority of the offense is running through. And when you're looking at their running options, Josh Allen is probably the best rusher on their team as well, and he finished the season with 763 rushing yards on the season and 6 rushing touchdowns. Now remember, rushing touchdowns are counted for 6 points. Passing touchdowns are counted for 4. So that's why you're going to see these quarterbacks with rushing potential going higher in the drafts, and they're going higher in the drafts because they have access to a higher ceiling. When they're scoring, 6 rushing touchdowns on the season as opposed to Tom Brady's 1, then that is given. Or no, Tom Brady had 3 rushing touchdowns. Wow. But it gives him access to a lot higher of a ceiling. And if we go back to 2019 and look at Lamar, he had 7. So if we're looking at Josh Allen last year, he was no Lamar Jackson, but 763 rushing yards with 6 rushing touchdowns combined with 4,400 passing yards. That's a player we're going to want access to. And in my opinion, the Buffalo Bills have stepped up their offense once again with the additions of Zach Moss and Jamison Crowder. So we're going to be looking to involve ourselves with Josh Allen as much as possible. However, in Underdog Fantasy, the difference between Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen is 2 rounds. So when you're drafting Josh Allen, you're taking him over players such as A.J. Brown, Nick Chubb, Alvin Kamara, James Conner, Kyle Pitts. Whereas when you're drafting Lamar Jackson, you're taking him over players like Juju Smith-Schuster, Rashad Bateman, J.K. Dobbins, Darnell Mooney. So the opportunity cost that you're throwing away with Josh Allen is a lot higher than with Lamar Jackson. And so that's why the only time I really target Josh Allen in these drafts is if I went with Stephon Diggs in the first round and Josh Allen falls to the mid to end 3rd round. So that's one thing you want to consider. If you truly believe that Josh Allen is going to outperform Lamar Jackson, then you can go ahead and play him or pick him in the 3rd round. But if you think they're going to be even equal by the end of the season, go ahead and grab Lamar 2 rounds later and give yourself some room to grab elite running back or wide receiver in the 3rd round. Moving on, we're going to go to another player that is going in the 5th round around the Lamar Jackson range. He has some rushing upside. He has a better offense this year than he did before, but not extremely different. He finished number 2 in quarterback fantasy points last year, and that player is going to be Justin Herbert. Now, the three teams that are fighting for the best offense in the league are the Chargers, the Buffalo Bills, and the Bengals. And you see two of those teams up here. So the reason these quarterbacks are coming through so high on this list in the S tier is that they're coming from a very productive offense. They all have rushing upside, and they're all very productive in the offenses that they run. So Justin Herbert last year had 5,000 yards passing. He had 300 yards rushing and 3 touchdowns, and finished the season just shy of 400 fantasy points at 395 fantasy points on the season. So, and the other thing you want to remember with Justin Herbert is he had a slow start to the season last year. So, if he starts this season as hot as he finished last season, then we could be looking at Justin Herbert being the number one quarterback overall. It's in his range of outcomes, is what I will say, and that is really what this whole S tier is about: is having potential for the number one quarterback finish overall. So we're gonna go ahead and throw Justin Herbert in the same breath as Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen based on trajectory and offense productivity. Moving on from the S tier, we're going to go knock it down one level, and that is going to be with our boy Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is a player that finished fourth overall last season. We know what we're getting from him. We're going to get some activity in the rushing game, kind of comparable to a Justin Herbert. If we look at last year, Patrick Mahomes had 381 on the ground, and Justin Herbert had 300, as we just mentioned. Patrick Mahomes has finished the last 2 years as the fourth quarterback overall, so he's averaging where we have him ranked over the past 2 years. I don't think that his wide receiver room breaking up is a huge deal. I think he has some pieces in there that he will make work, just based off of the player that he is. Now, if Tyreek Hill was leaving a quarterback like Derek Carr or Dak Prescott or someone in that range, we would be a little bit more concerned. But I truly believe that Patrick Mahomes will get it done with Travis Kelce and Juju, Sky Moore. He'll find a way. So we're going to throw him as the first player in the A ranking. And he finished last year with 374 fantasy points and 22 points per game. So I think this is a great range for him and is very comparable to the player that we're going to have right behind him for different reasons. Now, like we said, Patrick Mahomes had just shy of 5,000 passing yards last year and 381 rushing yards. The player coming in behind him will be Jalen Hurts. Very different quarterback, very different stats, and a very different way of getting there as far as points goes. Jalen Hurts finished the season last year as the 9th overall quarterback. He had 3,000 passing yards, but he had almost 800 rushing yards with 10 rushing touchdowns, because the difference between Jalen Hurts and a Lamar Jackson is that Jalen Hurts is kind of your Cam Newton build as far as physique goes, and that means that they're going to use him for goal line rushes more so than Lamar. You're not going to see Lamar rushing up the gut into the D line and linebackers to get that 1-yard touchdown on the goal line. But what you will see is Jalen Hurts barrel up through there, and that gives him potential to score more rushing touchdowns on the season, because they'll give him the ball on the goal line as opposed to the running backs. Now, I will say we have Miles Sanders coming back from an injury, so he may take some of those touchdowns away from Jalen Hurts in the red zone. But when you have a player with that rushing upside that just acquired A.J. Brown as a passing option, we expect to see the passing numbers go up. Potentially a slight drop-off in 10 rushing touchdowns, maybe down to around 8. And I would think there would be an increase in rushing yards from 780 to maybe in the 850, 900 range. He's a younger player that's just getting going. Philly has always been a contender. They find a way to stick it out. And I think that the Philadelphia Eagles are going to be really good this year, and Jalen Hurts will be a direct beneficiary of that. So moving on, we're pulling back from the rushing game here. Almost no rushing production at 118 rushing yards last year, but 4,600 passing. He gets it done with his arm. he has potentially, arguably, the best receiving core in the entire league, and that's going to be Joe Breezy. Joe Breezy is your traditional quarterback, but he has an incredible surrounding cast with his wide receivers and his running back, and they just upgraded the offensive line. We talked about having a valuable or a very productive offense and how that relates to the quarterback's productivity as far as fantasy points go. Joe Burrow had 20 points per game, and I expect his numbers to increase. He finished just above Jalen Hurts last year at number 8 overall. We have him taking a step this year, going up 2 spots to the number 6 quarterback on the season. Moving over to the West Coast, we are going to go ahead and throw our boy Kyler Murray in right behind Joe Burrow. Kyler Murray last year had the number 10th finish overall. He's kind of the quarterback where he's not a rushing quarterback per se, but he will get it done on his legs when the pocket breaks up and he has to get that extra 5 yards for a first down. So he finished the season with just around 400 rushing yards and 5 rushing touchdowns, but he's very productive in the passing game. He just got another weapon that he has great rapport with in Hollywood Brown. They went to the same college. He will get DeAndre Hopkins back after 6 games, which, that means he'll still have 10 games with him. So all of his weapons are still there for the most part. Chase Edmonds is gone as well, but with the combination of Marquise Brown, I think Rondale Moore takes a step this year. D-Hop will be gone for 6 games, but he'll be back. AJ Green, Zach Ertz. He's got a great core. He just signed his new big contract, so he's not going anywhere. I'm sure all of that is settled out. So that has Kyler Murray coming in at our number, 7th pick overall. Now, we start to get into the hot takes. This may be hot take number 1. For some of you, you probably have him ranked higher than where I'm about to put him. For some of you, you probably have him ranked way, way lower. And that player that's coming in, haven't seen a single season from him quite yet. Young guy coming into a run-heavy offense. We're going to go ahead and throw Trey Lance in the A tier behind Kyler Murray. Now, he is, this may come to a surprise to some of you, but he is a Jalen Hurts-esque quarterback. He's a big body. He is going to get the goal line touches, which is why I'm a lot lower on Elijah Mitchell this year than I was previously. And he will get a lot of rushing potential, and he's going to have the entire season to do so. So we're going to go ahead and throw Trey Lance as our last player in the A tier now. Last year, he played 6 games and had 168 rushing yards on the season, averaging just around 4.5 yards per rush. So I think he takes a step this year. He is a lot more mature, and I could even see him going in this S tier as far as the range where he may finish and the range of outcomes that he possesses. And the attractive thing about Trey Lance is his ADP on Underdog Fantasy is right around pick 80. And pick 80 is putting you into the 7th round. Now, Trey Lance has the potential to be a league winner, as we said. And if you can get a potential league winner at quarterback in round 7, that's where the value really comes in, because what you want to do when you're applying these rankings to your teams is you're going to want to take them with a grain of salt, and you're going to want to see where they go in the draft, because, if they're going too high, if the price is too rich, then the productivity is going to be extreme. That's what you're betting on. They're going to be highly efficient in their offense, but if you're paying a premium and having to pass up other premium players in that range, then that goes into your decision making on how you want to draft that player. And if you can grab a player in an A tier in round 7, that's also something you want to consider. So we have Trey Lance at number 8 overall. And if you can grab the 8th best quarterback in round 7, that's a value you want to be targeting. And when you're targeting Trey Lance, if you decide that early on, you can then go through and target Debo and George Kittle in the earlier rounds. It frees up your 4th and 3rd round pick. No, your 4th and 2nd round pick to not have to pick quarterback. Go ahead, pick the stack potential, and then grab Trey Lance later on. And if Trey Lance produces, he will benefit from that. Debo and George Kittle will benefit, and you can have yourself a really nice super stack with Trey Lance and the San Francisco 49ers. Now, we're going to move to the B tier, and these are going to be your more traditional passers, and that's why you see them in the B tier. Most of these players in the S and A tier, other than Joe Burrow is really the only one. But with Joe Burrow, you don't need the rushing upside because he has such a lethal supporting cast. But you see all of these guys up here have finished with 350 rushing yards or more in previous seasons. And then moving down to start the B tier, we're starting it off with a player that had 43 rushing yards, 0 rushing touchdowns, but was damn efficient in the passing game. He took his team to the Super Bowl. He supported one of the best wide receiver seasons of all time. And that is going to be Matthew Stafford coming in here as the first player in the B tier. And again, we love Matthew Stafford. We love his supporting cast. He has, again, one of the better supporting casts in the entire NFL. But he has no rushing upside. So, when we're looking at Matthew Stafford, he finished 5th on the season, just behind Patrick Mahomes last year. And he had 20 points per game. He played all 17 games. And that's the other thing you want to think about is B tier may not be as enticing as far as fantasy points scored by the end of the year. But if you're in a 12-man draft where you're really just trying to beat the players in your division or in your league, then you don't, maybe sometimes, depending on the structure of your team, maybe you don't need someone to produce, maybe you don't need your quarterback to produce 25, 30 points every week. Maybe you need a quarterback that's going to be available all season. You don't have to worry about them. The only week you're going to miss is the bye week. And this tier is going to have a higher likelihood of being available throughout the entire season based off of them not putting themselves in danger with their legs. So Matthew Stafford, one thing you got to remember, best ability is availability. And Matthew Stafford made it through all 17 games, giving you about 20 points per game in a standard league. In a half PPR, about the same. So Matthew Stafford is going to be our first player in the B tier. I think he has a slight drop-off, even though he is getting Allen Robinson. I don't see Cooper Kupp repeating the historic season that he just had. So even if he had a slight drop-off down to, say, 4,700 passing yards, you would still be looking at around 20 points per game. And I think if we want to put a range of where he's going to finish as far as passing yards go, I think you're anywhere from 4,700 passing yards to 5,100. I think that's possible for a player like Matt Stafford with the coaching staff he has and with a little bit more rapport with Cooper Kupp, getting Allen Robinson in. He could take that step as well. So we're going to throw him here in the B tier. Now, the next player right behind him only played 14 games last year. So his stats are a little skewed. He's walking into a offense that has a very good supporting cast in both the passing and the rushing game. A lot of potential on the offense. It's a very young team. So the player we're going to go with right behind Matthew Stafford is our boy Russell Wilson, starting off in Denver this year with Jerry Jeudy, Courtland Sutton, and Tim Patrick as the wide receivers. I'll tell you right now, there's going to be an absolute bomb in the wide receiver room in Denver. One of those receivers, a lot of people think it's going to be Courtland Sutton. I think it's going to be Jerry Jeudy. And there's a very small chance that it could be Tim Patrick. But one of those players is going to be a top 12 wide receiver in the league by the end of the year because of this man, Russell Wilson. When you're going from a Drew Lock to a Russell Wilson, you're going to have someone step up all the way and really produce this year. And Russell Wilson is going to be the facilitator of that. Now, in the 14 games that he played, he had just about 200 rushing yards on the season. So he still has a little bit of rushing upside, even though he is getting a little bit older, so they don't want to put him in danger. But if the pocket's collapsing, he can use his legs a little bit. So he does have that rushing upside. And, I mean, we've seen Russell Wilson do it for years now. He's a Hall of Fame quarterback, and he's walking into a new situation with very good players, a very good running back cast, which means if the offense is highly efficient, that means that and when we're talking about quarterbacks here, the running game helps as well, because if the overall offense is highly efficient, both passing and rushing, it's going to give everyone on that offense access to a higher ceiling, because they're going to be in the red zone a lot more. They're going to be scoring a lot more points as a team, and that means that there's going to be more points to go around to each individual player when we're talking about fantasy football. So, coming in behind Russell Wilson is going to be old man Tom Brady. Tom Brady had the number 3 finish on the year last year. The year before that, he finished at 8. Now, obviously, Tom Brady does not have the rushing upside. He had 81 rushing yards on the season, which is the lowest out of all quarterbacks until you get to Jimmy Garoppolo from last year. But he had 5,300 passing yards. Tom Brady had 5,300 passing yards last year. He had 43 touchdowns, and he was absolutely incredible at the age that he's at. And now, going into the season, what you may be thinking is, yes, Chris Godwin will not be there. Obviously, Antonio Brown is not going to be there. Obviously, Rob Gronkowski is not going to be there, which is why we have him bumped down a little bit. He's 1 year older. He has less options as far as overall talent goes. Now, I do think Russell Gage is a great late round wide receiving option in all drafts, especially throughout the first 6 games. Mike Evans is looking really good still, so he does have his favorite target. Arguably, I mean, Antonio Brown was extremely productive when he was there last year, but Mike Evans is a really good option for him, and I think he still finds himself as a highly productive quarterback. Now, what do we have him ranked here? 3, 6, 8. Yeah, so he's just outside of the top 10, but I do think that he has a very respectful season. I think he's in that 5,000 to 5,200 yard range, probably right around 40 passing touchdowns. And last year, he scored 22 fantasy points per game. So I think that he's 1 year older, has less passing options, but he's Tom Brady, best quarterback and best player of all time, if you ask me. So we're going to still give him the respect of putting him just outside of the top 10, but still an option worth drafting. Now, another thing worth noting is Tom Brady's ADP is actually right behind Trey Lance's. So if you're not a Trey Lance believer, you can still go through and grab Tom Brady around the 85th overall pick if you're looking at Underdog, which puts you at the beginning of the 8th round. So when you're drafting Tom Brady, you're drafting him over players like Kadarius Toney and Chase Claypool. So when you're getting a top 10 quarterback instead of a player that in Chase Claypool or Kadarius Toney that may not even give you the return on your investment, this is a really good value, and it's a pick worth taking, especially if you have players like Mike Evans and Chris Godwin and Russell Gage for that matter. So look for your stacks. You can get your players first. You can get your supporting crew first and your wide receivers to set up your stack so that by the time Tom Brady rolls around in the 8th round, you can go ahead and secure your stack and have yourself a nice little investment in the Buccaneers, who are 1 season removed from a Super Bowl winning team. Now, moving on past old man number 1, we're just going to find ourselves going ahead and ranking old man number 2 right behind Tom Brady. Aaron Rodgers is a player that finished last year with 4,100 passing yards, basically no rushing upside, a little over 20 fantasy points per game. But you got to remember, he is coming into a season with less targets. Now, one less target and one very important target, which is Devontae Adams, the best wide receiver in the league, in my opinion, as far as talent goes. And when you're taking that option away from him, yes, it's not going to ruin him. It's not going to break him. It's not going to turn him into an unserviceable quarterback by any stretch of the imagination based off of the talent that Aaron Rodgers has. But it's going to knock him down a few spots. He finished 6th overall last year, and we have him down here at 12. We have him taking a slight regression in overall finish. He is, again, also 1 year older, and his top options right now are a rookie that is unproven and Allen Lazard. So I think that Aaron Jones benefits from that greatly. I think A.J. Dillon benefits from that greatly. But as far as Aaron Rodgers' overall fantasy production on the season, I think he regresses a little bit, but is still a very good option. And something to note, we've talked about it before, but something to note is Aaron Rodgers at potentially the 12th overall quarterback in the league is going to go in the 10th round. He's going in the 10th round. Now, this is interesting because what you can do is you can grab him. He goes towards the 9-10 turn in most drafts as far as best ball goes. And again, all these rankings are going to be for best ball drafts because we've been so fresh and so seasoned in underdog fantasy drafts. But you got to take it with a little bit of discretion, but you can apply it to your redraft leagues as well. But the thing that's enticing about Aaron Rodgers is everyone's trying to guess who the number one option is going to be in Green Bay. Now, it's going to be either Allen Lazard or Christian Watson unless someone like Julio Jones or OBJ goes to that offense. And even if they do, I think it's still going to be Allen Lazard or Christian Watson unless you want to make an argument for Aaron Jones because he could even find himself being the number one receiving option in that offense by the end of the year. But the thing that's interesting and the point that I want to get to here is that when you're picking Aaron Rodgers on the 9-10 turn, you can easily create a stack with Christian Watson. They go very close as far as ADP to one another. So if you grab Aaron Rodgers, and the draft example I'm looking at right now has Aaron Rodgers going at pick 107, which is the end of the 9th round, and you can grab Christian Watson 3 picks later at 110 and make that stack. And if Christian Watson hits and he turns into this highly productive rookie and Aaron Rodgers number one passing option, then you have a great stack and you're profiting on a bet that was not very expensive to make as far as draft capital goes. So keep that in mind, and you got to take into consideration the value that Aaron Rodgers is at versus some of the other players ahead of him. Because although I don't think he will finish with more fantasy points than the players ahead of him, he is going way later in drafts. So you can focus more on peripheral positions, being running backs and wide receivers, and then still get a great and highly efficient quarterback later on once your team is already established. So that's a strategy worth considering. Now, there's the player coming in right behind Aaron Rodgers. He is going 3 rounds ahead of Aaron Rodgers, so take it into account the value that you are getting, or in this case, not getting with this player. And that player is going to be Dak Prescott. Now, I'm sure I'm sure every single one of you Cowboy fans out there watching this is going to be appalled. You guys are going to scream how the Cowboys had the most points scored in the NFL last year. You're going to scream how Dak Prescott is that dude, and the Cowboys, just like every other year for forever, for as long as I've been alive, this year is the Cowboys' year. They're making it to the Super Bowl. I've heard the whole thing, so try to contain yourselves a little bit in the comments, Cowboys fans. I know you really do believe what you're saying, but Dak Prescott is going to be coming in behind Aaron Rodgers for us. Now, he finished one position behind Aaron Rodgers last year at the 7th overall finish. He has a little bit of rushing upside, but not as much as you would think. I thought he was a quarterback that uses legs far more than he did. And the only reason I know that is because I have a stats pulled up right here. But Dak Prescott only finished with 40 more rushing yards than Aaron Rodgers. Dak Prescott, I'll say one more time. Dak Prescott finished with 40 more rushing yards than old man Aaron. So not very much. And this is an even funnier stat. Aaron Rodgers had 3 rushing touchdowns. Dak Prescott had 1. So your rushing upside is not there. He has 1 receiver removed, his number 1 option in Amari Cooper, who is a solid route runner, unless we're talking about the playoffs. But in the regular season, Amari Cooper is one of the best route runners in the entire league. He's where he needs to be when he needs to be there. So he's a great option for a quarterback, as a possession receiver, and he's gone. So we do have CeeDee Lamb moving into that number 1 role. I am a huge fan of Michael Gallup. I think Michael Gallup is extremely disrespected in these drafts as far as where he's going, and I think that I'm very high on Michael Gallup this year, and I think he slides into the role that CeeDee Lamb played last year seamlessly. I really do think Michael Gallup is one of the most underrated players in the division. He has Tony Pollard getting some reps in at the slot. Tony Pollard is an electric player. We've seen him, I've seen him. I think it was a kick return I watched on TV. He's doing kick returns. He's catching the ball. He's running the ball effectively. He's almost like a Cordero Patterson on the Cowboys. I think he's an electric player. So I'm not saying that Dak Prescott does not have plenty of weapons. And again, to go ahead and note, he had 4,400 passing yards on the season last year, which is only 200 yards behind Joe Burrow on the season. But I do think he takes a small step back into the number 13th spot overall. Am I right? Yeah, number 13 spot overall. But the thing that is interesting here, and the reason I don't have a whole lot of Dak Prescott, is let's not forget Aaron Rodgers is going in the 10th round. Dak Prescott, you have to take in the early 7th round. Let me go ahead and see what his ADP is here. His ADP is 87. And 87 is going to be right at the beginning of the 8th round, end of the 7th. So you're taking him 2 rounds ahead of players like Aaron Rodgers and Matt Stafford, who are ranked above him as far as fantasy points produced by the end of the year. To me, it feels like a reach. To me, he feels overvalued. And I've really been staying away unless I have a CeeDee Lamb stack on the horizon. I think his price is too high right now, and you may see it fall a little bit in redraft leagues. But I think unless you have a stack, you're going to want to stay away from Dak and look for other players in a later round, because the players that are going to sandwich him here in the B tier are going to be Aaron Rodgers, who is going right next to the next player on our list, Derek Carr. These players are both going in the early 10th round. We have Derek Carr at an ADP of 106, Aaron Rodgers at 109. So that's putting us in the 10th round. Derek Carr has better options, better receiving options than Dak Prescott, which, again, I'm sure a lot of you Cowboys fans will love to argue with me, and maybe some non-Cowboy fans, but just having Davante Adams alone is that moves you up. Let's see where Derek Carr ended. Derek Carr ended at 13, so we really have Derek Carr ending a little further back than last year. We have him slide in 1 spot as far as our rankings go, but that is giving us room for players like Russell Wilson to take the step forward. That's giving us room for players like Trey Lance to take the step forward. But Derek Carr has Hunter Renfrow, Davante Adams, who, again, I think is the best receiver in the league, and then Darren Waller, I think, makes a return here this year. The overall productivity of their offense, I think, is still going to be lacking based off of the coaching they have in Las Vegas, as well as the running game being not as strong as those in offenses ranked above Derek Carr. But again, when you're looking at the value that you can take on the players like Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr versus players like Dak Prescott, I'll go ahead and give you an example. Dak Prescott, you're going to have to take over players like Christian Kirk, DeAndre Hopkins, Miles Sanders, Drake London, Tony Pollard. Whereas players that you have to take Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers over, will reiterate, is going to be players like James Cook, Rondale Moore, Garrett Wilson, Ken Walker. So the area of the draft that you have to take these players in a best ball format is a lot more inviting than where you have to take a player like Dak Prescott. And based off of their overall upside, I think their upsides are all very comparable for different reasons. I think the supporting cast is best for Derek Carr. I think the talent is the best for Aaron Rodgers. And I think the overall offense is the best for Dak Prescott. So you have these guys all in the similar range. But when you could take Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers in the 10th round versus the 7th, I think that kind of speaks for itself. And that's why you have Dak Prescott with such a low team percentage for me on Underdog Fantasy when the drafts come through. But moving on to the last player in the B tier is going to be a player that finished 11 overall, 4,221 passing yards, 21 passing touchdowns. 33 passing touchdowns, 115 rushing yards with 1 rushing touchdown. He's going to be a player that goes into the season with a better situation. And the better situation isn't going to be an acquisition of a new player. It's going to be the acquisition of a new head coach that has a pass-heavy offense and is going to implement that system into Minnesota this upcoming year. It's going to be Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins is going to have the number 1 wide receiver overall this year in Justin Jefferson. Justin Jefferson will be, go ahead and mark my words, Justin Jefferson will be the number 1 receiver by the end of the year. And when we have a piece of that action with Kirk Cousins, and again, Justin Jefferson isn't paired with a scrub. He's going to be paired with Adam Thielen, who is one of the most productive and efficient players in the red zone. So when we have a field stretching option in Justin Jefferson with a red zone option like Adam Thielen, and then a rushing game with Alexander Mattison and Dalvin Cook, and an offense that is going to have the ball in Kirk Cousins' hands quite a bit, we're going to go ahead and throw Kirk Cousins in at the last player right behind Derek Carr in Tier B. Now, we're going to move into Tier C, and we're going to throw these players in as chunks. So just bear with us. This is getting to you're not going to be drafting these players for the most part in your redraft leagues a whole lot, but we're going to go through and throw Tua, Justin Fields, and Trevor Lawrence in the C tier, the first group of players in the C tier. Now, the thing that is common about all of these players is they have, maybe other than Tua, they have high rushing upside. One thing I didn't realize is Trevor Lawrence had 330 rushing yards last year, which is the highest until you go all the way up to Kyler Murray. 330 rushing yards is the highest amount of rushing yards that you can get until you get all the way to the 10th overall quarterback in Kyler Murray from last year. So his rushing upside is definitely there. We're talking about Trevor Lawrence here. And he's going to be walking into a far better situation this year than he did last. He was not very efficient. The overall offense was not very efficient. But he had probably the worst head coach of all time, or one of the worst head coaches of all time, in Urban Meyer last year. And to have someone like that in charge of your team when you're a rookie coming into the NFL is extremely detrimental. And when he doesn't even have Travis Etienne, which is his safety blanket running back that he played with at Clemson, you're looking at a player that is destined for failure, especially when you're looking at efficiency. Now, he had 3,600 passing yards. He had 330 rushing yards. His touchdown efficiency was not there, but he does have more weapons going into this season. And Travis Etienne, which we talked about, but he also has Christian Kirk coming in, which, yes, Christian Kirk isn't worth the contract that he got, but he is a huge upgrade for Trevor Lawrence to have, especially when you pair him with your Marvin Jones and Evan Ingram. And then you have Travis Etienne coming in at the running back position, and James Robinson will eventually come back as well, who was a highly productive running back. So the touchdown efficiency and the overall opportunities that offense is going to have this year compared to last is going to be much greater, and Trevor Lawrence will be a beneficiary of that, which is why we have him ranked around these players. Now, Justin Fields is kind of in the similar boat. You can pretty much plug and play most of what I said about Trevor Lawrence onto Justin Fields. If we want to get a couple quick stats on Justin Fields, he had basically no passing yards, but he only played 12 games. But in those 12 games, he had 420 rushing yards. So, and if you don't remember, Justin Fields, they tried to play him as Andy Dalton, just a plug and play offense, which that's not the quarterback that Justin Fields is. Justin Fields is a dual threat quarterback. He opens the pass. He's much like Lamar in the sense that he opens his passing game up with his legs. He gets the defense to back off a little bit and play the run, and then that's when he gets his opportunity. So he finished the season a lot better than he did than he started it last year. We have Darnell Mooney taking one step further. We have a better head coach coming in. We have N'Keal Harry coming, which doesn't do a whole lot for me, but the Cole Kmet, Justin Fields combination started to really get into full effect last year as well, with 5 receptions per game at the tight end position, which is very effective. So he has his tight end passing option. We're very high on David Montgomery. So I think the offense as a whole, again, just like Trevor Lawrence, takes us. I hope I didn't say Travis Lawrence at any point. For some reason, I feel like it did. But anyways, I think the opportunity and the strengths here are very similar between Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. I think Trevor Lawrence is a more pass-heavy quarterback with some rushing potential. I think Justin Fields is a more rush-heavy quarterback with passing potential. But I think they finish right in the same area after next season. And then Tua doesn't have much rushing potential. He finished the season last year with 130 rushing yards and 3 rushing touchdowns. So not the ceiling we want to see in the rushing game. But as we know, he has a highly productive pass-catching running back coming in to the backfield in Chase Edmonds. So that'll help his productivity. And obviously, we have Tyreek Hill coming in, which, again, I've said this before, but you don't even need to be a good quarterback to have Tyreek Hill put some points up for you. If you throw him a flat 2-yard pass, Tyreek Hill has the potential and the speed to score an 80-yard touchdown on a 2-yard pass. So that is something that he didn't have from last year. Jalen Waddle has had one of the better rookie wide receiver seasons last year. And he is, again, 1 year older. So when you have the combination of Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle as your wideouts, you have Mike Gesicki at tight end, and then you have players like Raheem Mostert and Chase Edmonds in your backfield. You're looking at that offense taking a step forward. He doesn't have the rushing upside, but he definitely does have upside as far as fantasy points goes in this upcoming season. And you can grab him at an ADP of 133. And if you look at the ADPs of Justin Fields, Tua, and Trevor Lawrence, those are guys that are all going in a similar range. Justin Fields going at 125, Tua going at 133, and Trevor Lawrence going at 140. So that's the range you're looking at with those players. And if you, especially in a best ball format, you can pair these guys up on a 3-quarterback league and not worry about quarterbacks until the later rounds, and then go through and pick 3 of these guys that will give you a very high ceiling that can compete against teams that have elite quarterback options, and you can build your team to be a super team with the wide receiver and running back positions early, and then pad your quarterback position with a few of these guys. So that's the range that we're going to start the tier C off with, and moving on to our next group of players in tier C is going to be Ryan Tannehill, Jameis Winston, and Jared Goff. Now, Ryan Tannehill. There's some of you out there that might be feeling disrespected for Ryan Tannehill. He finished 2020 as the number 7 quarterback overall. He finished 2021 as the number 12 quarterback overall. And we have a much lower here, obviously. We have a much lower than either of those finishes, but you have to remember he's losing A.J. Brown, who is an absolute stud of a receiver. It's part of the reason we have Jalen Hurts so high on our rankings. And he's just in an overall worse situation as far as the offense goes. So I do think he is down here in this Trevor Lawrence range. Ryan Tannehill has some rushing upside with 270 rushing yards last year, 7 rushing touchdowns. But again, his passing options are a lot. They're not as good as they were last year. And not only does that affect his passing yards, but that also affects the overall productivity of the offense and gives them less opportunities in the red zone. So you probably will see a regression from his 7 rushing touchdowns down to maybe the 4 rushing touchdown range. Jameis Winston, I love the offense he is going to be in. I think he has potential for a large amount of passing yards. I think he has a potential for a large amount of passing touchdowns. You got to remember his options are Chris Olave, Jarvis Landry, Michael Thomas, maybe Alvin Kamara. So he has a very good supporting cast. But you also got to remember he has a high potential for a lot of interceptions. Last time we saw him at a full season as a starter, he finished the season with the most passing yards, but also the most interceptions. So he definitely will sling the ball down the field, but he's not a very efficient quarterback, which leads us to put him down here at the C tier around players like Ryan Tannehill and Jared Goff. Jared Goff, again, is very similar to Jameis Winston. Absolutely incredible supporting cast, but not in the best situation. So that is going to finish off our tier C. I'm going to go ahead and throw all of tier D in here, starting with Baker Mayfield, moving to Matt Ryan, Mac Jones, Zach Wilson, and Daniel Jones. These are all quarterbacks that, let's see how I want to say this. I think the first 3 quarterbacks here are going to be quarterbacks that will lead their offenses and play floor general, if in basketball terms, I guess. That's where their where their fantasy point value comes in. Is these guys are going to benefit from putting their offenses in a position to win and putting their offenses in a position to score a lot of points. And that is where they will in turn benefit in their fantasy value from the team doing well. So no real rushing upside for these guys, but they will be great facilitators. Not great. They will be facilitators on offenses that have potential, and that is going to be strictly where their fantasy value comes in. Zach Wilson and Daniel Jones are a little bit different. Their offenses suck. They both actually have some decent peripheral options in running backs and wide receivers. But again, their offenses suck, and they have not done well either. Let's go ahead and pull up the stats for either one of these players. Zach Wilson played 13 games, had 12 fantasy points per game, nothing special. Daniel Jones played 11 games and had 300 rushing yards and 15 fantasy points per game. So the value with these guys is their rushing upside. They're not going to be efficient. Their offenses, I think both of their offenses do take a step, but they're not going to be great. And all of the value comes in from the rushing upside. Now, I will say, if any of these guys have breakout players in Kadarius Toney for Daniel Jones or Saquon Barkley, and for Zach Wilson, if he has Elijah Moore or Garrett Wilson really take off, or Breece Hall, then these guys might move up a little bit in the rankings or in the leaderboards throughout the season than we have them ranked. But you're really banking on one of those players being an elite talent and carrying the quarterback to a more efficient season than last. And I do think both of them take a step as far as efficiency goes this coming year. And honestly, after the news with Zach Wilson and his involvement in the Cougar exhibit over the past few months, we really should have him really in this range, honestly, because he's a guy that's going to go in there and he's just going to get what he wants. Obviously, in his job, he wants to win, and he is a guy that's used to getting what he wants. So we really should have him up in this range, but just based off of last year, let's go ahead and keep him down here. But all jokes aside, this range is really going to be a group of quarterbacks where they can be very valuable in a 3-quarterback build in a best ball format. You're never drafting them in redraft, but you don't want to have a 2-quarterback draft either with either one of these. Baker, you might be able to get away with it based off of his potential and his offense, but for the most part, you're going to want to have a group of these guys. Maybe you punt quarterback for the entire draft. And then you end up going with like Zach Wilson, Baker Mayfield, Jameis Winston, or something like that. Like you would want a 3-quarterback build once you get into this range. But moving on from tier D, we're going to go to our last tier, which these guys are only best ball. And these guys are only guys you want to take if you have, say, one higher up quarterback. Maybe you have Jalen Hurts. Maybe you have Jalen Hurts. You punt quarterback for the entire draft, and then you go through and grab like 2 of these E-tier guys just to back him up and give us a potential spike week here and there. But you're not going to want to be counting on these guys at all. So we're gonna, and again, all these tiers from S left to right are going to be in order. So even though we're throwing these tiers up as a group at this point, they're all still in order. I have them ranked beforehand. So take that into consideration when you're grabbing these guys, if you do grab these guys. But I'm just going to throw the entire tier up here for you. It's going to be Carson Wentz, Mitchell Trubisky, Davis Mills, Drew Lock / Geno Smith, depending on how that all shakes out, Marcus Mariota, and then in dead last, Jacoby Brissett. Not much needs to be said about these guys. You're really only grabbing them as a shot in the dark, 3rd quarterback. You do not want to be counting on these guys at all. They should not be drafted in your redraft leagues. But this is our rankings, and if you need to grab one of them towards the end of the season, preferably, or at least for me, I would prefer Carson Wentz and Davis Mills in this range because all of these other quarterbacks have question marks. We don't know if Kenny Pickett's going to play at all. We don't know if Drew Lock is going to be the starting quarterback. We don't know if Marcus Mariota is going to play the entire season. We have Desmond Ridder behind him. And then Jacoby Brissett, we're still waiting on the verdict for Deshaun Watson at the time of this recording. So we don't know what has happened to him yet. And while we're at it, what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and rank Deshaun Watson if he does come back. Now, let's go ahead and assume that he misses 6 games. Let's say he misses 6 games. I think where his value will fall is probably going to be right in this range. Now, if he was going to play the entire season, he'd probably be more like here. But I think he gets at least 6 games, and that would put his value right around here. When he does come back, he's in a very good situation with the best offensive line in the league, or at least one of the best. One of the best backfields in the league. He has Amari Cooper. David Bell's been looking good. David Njoku looks fine. His rushing upside in 2020, he had 440 rushing yards with 3 rushing touchdowns and almost 5,000 passing yards. So he is an absolute elite talent, and that's why I think he would be in this range if he was playing the entire season. But assuming he's going to miss some time, this would be where he falls. But I'm still under the impression that he's not going to be playing this season. So we're going to have Jacoby Brissett in dead last. But I just want to mention Deshaun Watson just in case. Now, another player I think is worth mentioning just in case they end up getting traded and playing. I think we have someone like Jimmy Garoppolo coming in right around this range if he ends up getting traded to Seattle. This is only in the event that he does get traded to Seattle, but that's where I think he would be. And obviously, you would have your boy Drew Lock fall off. And again, just please never draft Marcus Mariota or Drew Lock or Mitchell Trubisky unless it's a super flex league. But that's going to wrap up the first ranking video. As I said before, I'm extremely excited to see everyone's opinions, and I'm extremely excited to see you guys roast me. I know there's some hot takes in here, and I know there's going to be some disagreement, and that's the best part about these ranking videos is everyone has their own opinion, but if you do value mine, here are the rankings, and here are the finishes that I feel will end up happening throughout the season. And this is how I'm going to rank the quarterbacks in my head as we go through these drafts. We're going to take these rankings of overall potential on the season, compare them with their value of where they're going in the draft, and we're going to make our decisions accordingly. You always want to go for stacks in best ball. You definitely want to go for stacks in redraft as well. So that's another thing to take into consideration of when you can grab supporting cast for these quarterbacks. But here is a ranking video for you. First one, give us the feedback. If you like the video, please go ahead and like the video, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you guys can catch us live when we do our live fantasy drafts. You can come hang out with us, or if you're quick enough, you can get into the same draft as we are in, and you can snipe us on players if you want to be that guy. But one more thing I want to go ahead and throw in here while it's still available. This is not an Underdog Fantasy video, but I'm going to tell you now, go ahead and sign up for Underdog Fantasy to get involved in some of these drafts. Your first deposit from $10 to $100 will get matched at 100% if you use code FFX54, name of the channel above my head. It takes nothing away from your match, but it supports me and allows me to get into more of these drafts. While these puppy drafts are not available, we are going to go ahead and do a Best Ball Mania draft once a week and do a ranking video once a week. So go ahead, support the channel. Like, comment, subscribe. I really hope you guys enjoyed this ranking video. It's a little different for me. It's a first, so I had a lot of fun doing it. I like putting these together, and you're going to continue to see some of these in this format. For tight ends will be next week. Running backs will be the following week. And then wide receiver will either be the week after that or the next 2 weeks after that. I haven't decided how we're going to do that quite yet. I do want to get most of the wide receivers ranked. We'll probably end up doing a batch ranking for the later rounds. But I do want to get all the players going in the 18 rounds of Underdog Fantasy drafts just so you have something to base your decisions off of. I really do want this to be a tool that you can use. The controversy is a lot of fun. We can argue all day long. But I think there's a lot of good information that I've given you guys here, and that all these rankings are based off of information, projection, and trajectory. So this isn't just thrown together on the spot. We took time to go ahead and rank these guys based off of stats and information and trends. So I want this to be a tool for you guys. Next year, maybe we get into the realm of doing draft guides that you can use for the entire offseason and for your redraft leagues. But for now, this is what we're going to do for this year. The channel's still new. We've been getting a lot of traction and a lot of engagement. So I really appreciate everyone that's been coming out to the live streams. If you haven't seen the live streams and if this is the first video that you've seen, go check them out. They're a lot of fun. They're a lot more casual. But yeah, so I really do hope you guys appreciated this. I loved making these videos. Look for one next week. But until then, thank you guys for checking the video out and giving your feedback. But until then, everyone have a great week. And I'll see you guys next week.